loved one in the hopes that someone has seen them. Let's talk to Ms. Diaz here, who is looking for her cousin, Aida Rosario Vasquez. Tell me about what your day has been like trying to look for her.
Since Tuesday, this has been going on. We've been waiting for her to call. No, she hasn't called, no one in the family. We've been calling hospitals. She's not on any of the lists in the hospital. We decided to come here today with the flyers that we made up from her. We came to the Armory. We did a missing persons report on her, and we went downstairs to see the list. She's not on any of the lists that are downstairs. So this is our last hope. If anyone has seen her or heard from her, please contact the number that's listed on this flyer, and please, if you see her, let her know that we're waiting for her to call home, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Diaz. Helena Diaz. Joey, I want to tell you how people have been so helpful out here. They have donated food at the Armory. Children have made cookies and have distributed them with notes saying, "We love you," to the people who are inside the Armory. Joey?
Elizabeth Cohen there at the Armory. And again, to any viewers who still want to get the word out about their loved one, missing at CNN.com. If you will send in your picture of your loved one, we'll post it on the website. This is another opportunity for those many, many people in New York who are trying to get the word out about the people they are looking for.
Many people we've heard from descriptions too, describing the people for whom they're looking, so that can be applied to this as well. In the meantime, though, it is only day 3. Unfortunately, we shall be back tomorrow. But in the meantime, to Washington, Wolf Blitzer and Greta Van Susteren take over for us now. Good night.
This is a CNN special report. America under attack. The search for answers, with thousands missing. Rescue workers desperately race against time in the ruins. As investigators learn more about those who carried out the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. It's believed at least 18 hijackers seized the 4 airliners. How did they get here? Who helped them? Who sent them? We'll go live to our correspondents. And we'll speak live with House Intelligence Chairman Porter Goss and William Webster, former director of the FBI and CIA. Meantime, the U.S. prepares to respond.
We'll go after that group, that network, and those who have harbored, supported, and aided that network to rip the network up.
The president says his administration will now focus on winning a war. How will the U.S. gear up for a fight? Who's the target? Is Congress on board? We'll hear live from our correspondents, including Nick Robertson in Afghanistan. We'll speak live with House Democratic leader Dick Gephardt and get perspective from CNN senior analyst Jeff Greenfield.
Good evening, I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting tonight from Washington. Behind me, the White House, identified as a terrorist target. The security perimeter has been extended with surrounding streets closed.
I'm Greta Van Susteren. In the background, the Capitol, where Congress is moving to aid families victimized by Tuesday's terror attacks and channel billions of dollars to a new war against terrorism.
Greta, CNN's Jamie McIntyre is at the Pentagon with a developing story on U.S. military reserves and fighter jets. Jamie, tell us what's going on.
Well, Wolf, as you may or may not have been aware, for the last couple of days, U.S. fighter jets have been on 15-minute strip alert at 26 bases around the country. That means those pilots have to be ready to take off those fighters within 15 minutes in order to respond to any threat against the United States. Those have been mostly air and guard troops manning those planes. Now the Pentagon is considering calling up thousands of reservists to provide more pilots and air crews to man those planes and to fill some critical shortages in special areas that might be needed in the rescue efforts. Right now, I'm told that there has not been a final decision, a final authorization from President Bush to call up reserves, but it could come as soon as tonight. The last time the United States activated the reserves was during the 1991 Persian Gulf War, when more than 200,000 reservists were called up. Wolf?
Jamie, this development, what does it say, if anything, about a possible U.S. military response to these terrorist attacks?
Well, I think this is more related to the what's called here at the Pentagon Homeland Defense, making sure that the United States is able to protect itself first. You know that there were combat air patrols flown over many metropolitan areas across the United States. Today, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld ordered that scaled back so that combat patrols were just being flown between the Washington and New York corridor, and the rest of the country was protected by planes on alert. But this is part of an overall increase in U.S. military readiness so that the armed forces will be ready to carry out whatever orders President Bush may give.
Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon, thank you very much. And as the search goes on for those behind the attacks, authorities have learned a lot about those they believe carried them out. Let's go live to CNN's Justice correspondent Kelly Arena for details. Kelly?
Well, Wolf, the Justice Department and FBI today said that they have identified 18 hijackers. So there were 5 on 2 planes, 4 on 2 others. They're not just guesstimating here. They have their names and information about them. We were expecting that we might be able to get our hands on those names and pictures of the hijackers sometime this evening, but the FBI and Justice have decided not to release that information just yet. As you know, though, those are supposedly dead, those 18, and so the investigators are truly focusing on any information that they can gather regarding associates, friends, financial backers. So the investigation is fanning out, not only here in the United States but overseas as well. The FBI has truly increased its forces just from yesterday, where we knew that there were more than 8,000 people working on this investigation, Wolf.
And what's going on as far as the scope? What do we know about how many individuals may in fact have been involved in this conspiracy?
Well, law enforcement sources have told us that it could be as many as 50, although the numbers keep fluctuating, Wolf, and I have been told to really be cautious about going with any numbers because it could be much greater than that. They just really have no idea just yet. And
what have you learned, Kelly, about the black boxes from those 4 planes that went down?
Well, one of the flight data recorders was indeed recovered, the one from the crash in Pennsylvania, which will be a great help to investigators. There's also a signal from the flight data recorder from the flight that crashed into the Pentagon. So very hopeful for recovery of that as well, Wolf.
Okay, Kelly Arena, thank you very much. Greta?
Search for clues leading to those behind the attacks is taking investigators around the world. CNN national correspondent Mike Betcher has the latest on that investigation, and he joins us from Atlanta. Mike?
Clearly. Can you hear me? Well, as investigators around the world and in the United States attempt to unravel this terrorist conspiracy, several people have been detained for questioning, and at New York's Kennedy Airport, at least one person was arrested today because he had a fake pilot ID, according to New York City police. But the biggest break in the day came from those comments from the Attorney General when he said his agents and the FBI had a list of 18 people who were aboard those hijacked jets. Mohammed Atta, shown in this photograph, and Marwan al-Shari are 2 of the men on that list of 18, according to federal investigative sources. Both held United Arab Emirate passports, but it's not clear if they are actually citizens of that country. The lives the 2 men led are the objects of an intensive international investigation, stretching from Florida to Germany. In Hamburg, Germany, federal police launched an extensive search of an apartment shared by Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shari last February. During an additional search of another Hamburg apartment, a woman was taken away for questioning. She clutched a baby in her arms as German police tried to hide her with a sheet. During the night, a total of 8 apartments were searched in the Hamburg area. Back in the U.S. in Pompano Beach, Florida, FBI agents converged on a small rental car company called Warrix. Records show that Atta rented 2 automobiles at that location.
Well, the first contract, he only put on 200 miles, 254 miles or something like that, which is very small. That's exceptionally small. The next contract was the 2-week rental, and he drove 1,915 miles, which he had told me he'd been over on the West Coast. He called me from over on the West Coast.
The FBI also came here, a company called SimCenter in Opelika, Florida. The owner said 3 men, Atta among them, paid cash for 6 hours of flight instruction on a Boeing 727 simulator. Their instructor, Henry George, said they weren't too interested in takeoffs and landings.
What I can recollect from my memory is that we mostly did turns in a couple of approaches. I don't think we did any more than that. It was, like I said, it was not a structure. It wasn't our typical or normal lesson plan.
The FBI knocked on hundreds of doors today, and before it's all over, they will be knocking on tens of thousands of doors. Also tonight, we would like to correct a report that appeared on CNN last night. Based on information from multiple law enforcement sources, CNN reported that Adnan Bukhari and a brother, Amir, of Vero Beach, Florida, were suspected to be two of the pilots who crashed into the World Trade Center. Today, CNN learned that Adnan Bukhari is still in Florida, where he was questioned yesterday by the FBI, and after taking a lie detector test, today he was cleared of involvement in Tuesday's airliner attacks. We are sorry for the misinformation. Through his attorney, Bukhari says he is not connected at all with this, that he is helping authorities, and that any documents that they found with his name means his identity was stolen. He says Amir Bukhari, who he says is not his brother, died in a small plane crash last year. Greta?
Mike, we now have identified, or at least the authorities have, the 18 hijackers. How about anyone who may have aided or helped them in this terrible crime? Is there any information leading to those?
Well, there's a lot of information they're following up on. In their trips to these various apartments, they have questioned people also at flight training schools, and they're really focusing on these flight training schools. And they have made no arrests that we know of right now people who are formally being charged as accomplices in this, but they're questioning a lot of people and have a list of names of people that they believe could have been accomplices, and they're looking for those people, Greta.
All right, thanks to Mike Fetcher, our national correspondent in Atlanta. The administration and Congress seem to be responding to the terror attacks with one voice. Joining us now from Capitol Hill is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Joe Biden. Senator, America is quite angry. What can they expect in the weeks to come?
I hope what they can expect is two things, Greta. Number one is the biggest coalition that you've ever seen in the world that is being put together by the administration headed by Colin Powell to deal with systemic terrorism. This is a big deal. When NATO voted what they call an Article 5 procedure, which means that they view the attack against the United States as attack against them as well, and required them to come to our defense. We're getting significant progress in the Middle East among the moderate Arab states. We're getting cooperation from Russia. We've gotten a commitment. I spoke myself today, the head of the intelligence services for Pakistan. And so I think you'll see that, number one. Number two, I think when we have clearly identified who these folks are, taken that to this coalition, we will not only be going alone, we will go with the support of the world, which is a fundamentally different position to be in than we have been before. These guys have crossed the line, Greta, even for terrorists, and they have, in a way, that I view this not as the end of any American freedoms, but the beginning of the end of organized terrorism as we've known it in the last part of the 20th century.
Senator, is the writing on the wall? Because earlier today, Colin Powell, Secretary of State, said that Osama bin Laden is the leading suspect. He didn't say he was the only suspect or that he is the person. And President Bush said from the Oval Office on September 11th that we will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. If Afghanistan is harboring Osama bin Laden, and if he is the leading suspect, the suspect, do you expect action against Afghanistan?
I take the president at his word. I've been privy to these security briefings. It's not appropriate for me to talk about Afghanistan or anyone else. The fact is, we will move not only against the networks, we will move against anyone who has harbored them, is harboring any of them, and we will do it, I believe, with the strong support of the world community. I'm sorry I lost you.
Senator, is the state of our defense such that in the event the president does decide to take military action, we're ready?
I believe we are. I believe we are ready, and there will be absolute unity. The president needs no constitutional authority to respond, in my view, but we are to demonstrate the total cohesion of Democrats, Republicans, and House, Senate, and the president. We are preparing a resolution of use of force that will make it absolutely clear to the world we are totally united.
What does that use of force actually do besides send a message to the world?
That's basically what it does, Greta, but that's a very important thing. It's a very important thing for the whole world to know there is not any crack whatsoever, no daylight between us or among us based on party or based upon institutional responsibility. And that's an important thing. That's always been what presidents have wanted and needed at a time of national unity. And in that sense, it's important.
Senator Biden, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Greta.
Wolf?
Thank you, Greta. And to help us learn more about the investigation and what the United States may be up against, we're joined now by William Webster. He served as director of both the FBI and the CIA, and shortly we'll be joined by Congressman Porter Goss, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Chairman Goss is also himself a former CIA agent. But first to you, Director Webster, Judge Webster, what do you think? What happened here? Was someone asleep at the switch in the U.S. intelligence community?
I doubt it very much, Wolf, but I don't think that's the question we should be asking right now. Right now we've addressed the wounded, the dead, and the families. And we're now vigorously undertaking to inform the American people and inform our government who and what is responsible for this event. Those are the questions. We'll find out if someone was asleep at the switch, but 20 years of dealing with terrorism with some degrees of successes, know how difficult identifying small, cellular, secretive groups who pick their time, their place, and their instrumentality. We've had some successes, but we can't be perfect on it. We'll just have to see what the facts were in this case, but we shouldn't get off our mission by beginning to point fingers so early in the game.
All right, Chairman Goss, I assume you'll be reviewing at some point down the road your oversight intelligence panel what may have gone wrong in the days, weeks, months leading up to these tragic incidents. But right now, the immediate question many Americans are asking is, can they stand down? Is this current terrorist operation over with?
Well, I will tell you this, Wolf. I think that it is well understood that there are still terrorists out there. There are still targets of interest to them in the United States, on our homeland, including the United States Capitol. And I think we would be very foolish to let our guard down one iota. So I am encouraging people to keep the guard up, to be prudent, not let our quality of life or our behavior of life be dictated by acts that terrorists have taken, but we need to be a little vigilant ourselves of how we go about things, and we particularly need to be aware that we don't want to be fooled by rumor or innuendo or disinformation. This is a time for calm and patience and thoughtfulness.
As you look at this situation, Judge Webster, do some structural changes in the way the U.S. engages in intelligence gathering, some structural changes, immediate structural changes, perhaps come to mind?
No, I don't think so. Chairman Goff may have a different view of it. I think we're always looking to see how we can improve interchanges between the various agencies that have both information and intelligence. The security issues here have to do with protection of people who get on airplanes and hope to be safe. Intelligence issues have to do with information about plots, vulnerabilities, and those who are seeking to undermine our government. Those are basically the same, but we're always looking for ways to make sure that everybody involved knows everything that they need to in times like these.
Chairman Goss, we've heard a lot over these past 48 hours about a problem perhaps in the CIA that developed in 1995. Even former President Bush spoke about it today, himself a former CIA director, that the CIA stopped, in effect, recruiting spies or agents within some of these terror cells, reluctant to put them on the payroll. Is that a serious problem?
It is a serious problem. There's some controversy about how serious, but I think that the proof, unfortunately, is in the pudding. In order to deal with this kind of a very hard target to get into and to penetrate, we have to have agents that can get down and dirty and live in the ugly kind of world of innuendo and terror that these people live in. You've got to have that kind of a person. Now, obviously, we don't want to aid or abet those people or reward them in any way, but we want to get information from them. So it's a question of being smart enough to be able to use people like that to our advantage without encouraging them and building up networks. One area in the question you've just asked, Wolf, I think is very, very important. We need to reinvest in human intelligence capability. We have stripped down and diminished our assets in that area to a point that is unwise. Many of us have been warning about it for some time, and I think we find ourselves now with not enough capability and not enough properly tailored capability to meet the needs of the hour for our full national security.
Judge Webster, you're unique in this field. You're both a former CIA director and an FBI director. You know that the FBI occasionally has to infiltrate organized crime and put some sordid characters on the payroll. How does the CIA get around this problem that Chairman Goss and others have been discussing?
Well, by the way, I agree with Chairman Goss. It wasn't, that my understanding is that what happened was not a prohibition against using unsavory types, but requiring a high level of authority, which had to go pretty much to the top to get permission, which may have had a dampening effect on those who were able to recruit individuals with solid information but unsavory backgrounds. I think that that restriction has been or will soon be removed, and I support that. The agency knows how to deal with them, but they're in many parts of the world. Their best sources are people in the military who sometimes engage in torture and other activities we find unacceptable at home, but the information is reliable and important and timely. Those are hard choices. As the Chairman said, we don't support it, we don't do anything to help it, but we ought to be able to derive information of importance to our national interest.
Chairman Goss, let me wrap up by asking you briefly a question that Greta asked Senator Biden. If, in fact, Osama bin Laden was responsible, and if the Taliban regime in Afghanistan is protecting him, harboring his organization, should the U.S. go to war not only against Osama bin Laden, but against Afghanistan itself?
Well, I don't want to say go to war and get into the legal argument about what constitutes war. What I do want to suggest, however, is the idea of state-sponsored terrorism. That definition has changed. I believe that it's any state that tolerates this kind of behavior or the opportunity for training or safe harbor for individuals, safe transit through countries, logistic support, banking support, things of those nature. I think we, as the United States, need to make it clear that that will not be tolerated any longer. I think we need to give a warning period for people to cooperate and do the decent thing to make life impossible for known terrorists and their activities in those circumstances. And then I think if we don't get the cooperation we need to take force more than diplomatic. And I'll just leave it at that.
May I add one thing to what Porter Goss has said, and that is the subject of sanctuary. It wasn't too many years ago that some of our best friends, particularly in the Mediterranean area, engaged in a policy of sanctuary. You're free to come here and we won't bother you as long as you don't do anything against us. They learned to their sorrow that that pledge could not be trusted. Many of those countries have completely shifted, and the pockets of sanctuary around the world have been severely shrunk. It seems to me that we have one country here that is tolerating terrorist activity, and it needs to be addressed. There are others, but when you eliminate the sanctuary, you make it very difficult for the non-state-sponsored terrorists to be effective.
Okay. William Webster and Porter Goss, always good to have both of you on our program on CNN. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Now let's get the latest from the scene on the ground in New York. CNN's Martin Savage is there. Marty, tell us what's going on over there.
Well, Wolf, they're still trying to get over the emotional devastation of learning the fact that the story originally reported of 5 firefighters being found is no longer true. This is the way the officials explain it to us as to what happened. There have been a number of firefighters working at the top of the debris pile earlier today. Some of them slipped and fell. They ended up at the bottom of the pile, picked up by a few rescuers. When the rest of the throng of those that were there working, looking for survivors saw this, they misinterpreted it, thought that it was in fact 5 firefighters being pulled from the ground, pulled from the rubble. Cheers went up, there was celebration. And then the New York City Police Department confirmed that in fact the firefighters had been found. The hospital, Bellevue, had said that they were awaiting their arrival. In the end, it turns out, according to the fire department, it was merely a matter of too much confusion at the site and perhaps too much hope. Meanwhile, the search effort today went on with a new intensity. They went throughout the day trying to find those survivors. Literally hundreds of New York City firefighters from all over, There were also police departments and the rescuers that showed up. And finally here, George Sikorsky. This is an amazing story. He's a volunteer that showed up with a dog named Dominique to look. Dominique's not his dog. The dog belongs to his son, Gregory, a New York City firefighter. That firefighter is now missing. So the father has come to look for the son, using the son's dog. This is George explaining how he hopes the two can work together to find Gregory.
He was learning how to sniff out the dogs on the fire department. Gregory was training him, so I bought him his gloves, and I gave him the gloves. I'm going to sniff them, and I'm going to try to locate him. I don't know, it's kind of deep down there, but I guess the other dogs down here are tired.
Yeah.
So we're going to try anything new, anything we can try.
It's just desperate times. You've got to try anything you can.
Right. We've still got hope.
This is not the only case of a relative that has volunteered to help look for survivors and maybe their own relative. Earlier in the day, I was talking with a young man who's an engineer and a volunteer. He's not here because of his expertise. He's here because his brother was working in the World Trade Center and now is also missing, among so many others. Meanwhile, tonight, there are concerns about a change in the weather, also concerns about 3 buildings that are thought to be unstable. It remains to be seen exactly how much rain is in the forecast or how much of an impact it will have on the search efforts. Meanwhile, the lights are on, the efforts to find survivors goes on, and all the while over their heads is the threat of buildings that could still come down. Wolf?
Marty, and we don't know what that rainfall is going to cause. Thanks so much for joining us. Greta?
Wolf, we're going to go now to New York to Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth Cohen is standing by at the Armory in New York. Elizabeth, first of all, what is the Armory being used as tonight?
Well, what it's being used as is a place for people who are missing loved ones to come in and register information about who's missing. The line has been around the block all day. I don't know the number, but I would imagine it's in the thousands, have come and they give all information, hair color, eye color. It's a 7-8 page form that they fill out. When they've given all the information and the person is registered, they then go downstairs and there are 2 lists. There is a list of people who are in the hospital and there is a list of people who they have found who are deceased. I was talking to a volunteer who worked inside there, and she said that she was amazed that almost no one broke down, even though it must be obviously a horrible, difficult thing to go through. I have 2 families here who went through the process at the Armory today. Let's talk with them. We have here Nilsa Rivera, who is looking for her husband, Isaias. They're from Rahway, New Jersey. Tell me, what was the... Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Tell me what you've put on this poster here. He has a black mole. He has black spots on his neck. He worked for CBS. What are you hoping will happen with this poster?
I'm hoping that this is a way for the media, who has more access than we do, to be able to go around and identify him or try to find him for me. You know, this is the second time we're going through this nightmare again. He was also involved in the '93 World Trade bombing. And I feel that this time the media can help me, or, you know, to find him or get, if not a glimpse of hope, some answers as to his, you know, whereabouts. I'm trying to keep the faith, and I'm trying just to search for him. I want him to come home.
The T-shirt you're wearing is from the terror at the towers, is from the bombing in 1993. Did he hesitate to go back to work in that building?
Yes, he did. Even though he was very loyal and devoted and stayed during the World Trade bombing back in '93 and helped Channel 2 stay on the air, and he helped the fire department and police department to evacuate lives, not thinking of his own. And he stayed there faithfully till the next day. Shortly after that, it emotionally affected him, emotionally and physically. And he did express many times, not only to myself, to his co-workers and superiors, that he was afraid. He would experience phobias, panic attacks to go back into this building because he was afraid that this can occur again. And 8 years later, his worst nightmare became now a reality.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivera. Thank you, Mrs. Rivera. We're also going to speak with Franca Adesina, who is looking for her friend Sadie Ed. What was the last thing that anybody heard from your friend Sadie?
Well, Sadie called at about 5 minutes after 9. She said, "Oh God, please save me." She said she's trapped on the 106th floor. She was screaming that she can't get out. She's trapped, she can't get out. So she was yelling. She said, "Now, I don't know what to do. I'm coughing. The heat is coming. Please, I'm coming. I need water, I need water." And the phone dropped. We have checked the whole list in the armory over there. She's not on the dead list. She's not on the list on the hospital, so we are hoping for the best. Maybe she's in the hospital, she cannot talk, or maybe, but we hope with this picture, they'll be able to locate her in the hospital and contact us. The numbers are listed below for anybody to contact us, the hospital officials, the police, anybody.
You're here with so many families who are also looking for people. Have people banded together? Have they helped one another?
Yes, that's what we have been trying to do. We've been calling each other. We've been trying to hug ourselves together, pending until her return. Or
do you still now, more than 2 days later, almost 3 days later, have hope?
Well, we still have hope because her name is not on the dead list. So we think maybe she's in the hospital. Or
she cannot speak. Maybe she's not been recognized. No
maybe.
ID.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk to we're all friends, we're all together. Let's talk to this gentleman here who is looking for Shabir Ahmed. Tell me about the last time someone heard from him.
Okay, he's my uncle. Last time he left like Tuesday morning about approximation 5:30 in the morning. He was scheduled to work for Windows on the World. He works for the banquet department, so he was working when the crash took place. So since then, we haven't heard from him, nothing yet. So we are expecting to hear something good that I could at least today take a news to the family of his. He left like his 2 daughters and 1 son, and other family members all are in a shocked situation and all feeling and waiting for him. That's what I have to say to you right this moment. I spent whole day here looking for any clues if they found his name or any kind of information.
Have you found any clues?
Unfortunately not. So I have to come back. I think I have to make trips back and forth here. I will do it because he's my uncle, so he was the great person. And what can I say? I'm missing him. We're all going to be missing him as well as other good people, the victims. And that's all I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And sir, you are also looking for a loved one. Can you tell me?
I'm looking for all the members of Windows on the World, floor 107, because we have nothing on them. We have no data, because everything is gone, all the punch in and out. So we want them to call this number, the union number, so we will know who's missing, who's not. And about Shabir Ahmed, the gentleman who just said, he was in the first bombing, and he made it out, but he couldn't make it this time.
So some of the people, you work for a union?
Yes.
And so some of the people who were in your union were in that building and made it out in 93?
Yes. And one of them is Shabir. But this time he could not made it. But please, everybody who knows anybody about Windows on the World employees, call the number, call the union. And we're going to have a big meeting on Tuesday, next Tuesday, at the union office. And anybody who can attend, all the families, it's a very important meeting.
Has anyone made it out from your union, from this group of workers for Windows on the World? It's the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Tower, for people who don't know it.
Unfortunately not. Nobody made it. Not nobody that we know made it. We hope that they made it, but we didn't hear from nobody yet.
And how many people in this union?
Well, we are 450 employees, but we have shifts. It's not everybody who was there. But we are at least 450 employees there.
And how many were there at the time of the explosion?
We don't know, but the list I have, it's like 88, between 80 and 88 people missing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's also talk to this woman here. You were looking for Margaret Echterman.
My sister, yeah.
Tell me about Margaret.
Margaret's 33 years old. She worked for Regis. She was on the 93rd floor of the second Trade Center. We talked to her last after the first crash, and she called everyone to tell everybody that she was okay. And so we haven't heard anything since then, but we know she's there. So we're just, getting her face out there so everyone can find her. And we covered all the hospitals and have her on the missing persons, and everyone's here to support us, so it's great. So you just have to find her. We know we will.
So tell me, you've spent 2 days, you're going to the hospitals, public offices also. Were you at the Armory today? Were you in there?
Yeah, we've been there as well. We've registered her, and we're going to get back online to see if they've got any updates. They keep updating the list, so, we just keep getting back over there, but we've been traveling around. We've been getting a lot of calls from people that have, seen her on the different sites that we've posted her on, just to try to see whatever they could do to help out. So people are really, really being incredible.
Do you have any clues at all?
No clues, no. So we've been hearing lots of good stories about people making it off of really high floors. So we just know that she's one of them, and we just have to figure out where she is.
So tell me about her. She's very beautiful, I can tell from the picture, but tell me more about her.
Yeah, she was running. She was get ready to run for the marathon, so she was training with a lot of her friends, and she's an incredibly strong person. So she's got a sense of life in her that's just so strong that anybody, we pray for everybody to find their way out of there, but we want. So yeah, she just has everybody supporting her, and she's a kind, generous person. So she's the type of person that would, make sure that everybody got off the floor with her and helping them out.
Tell me about, have people banded together? Obviously, there are hundreds of families here.
Oh yeah, people have been so incredible. My friend Ted's come down from Boston, and my brother's coming up from Florida, and we have people all over the country, in Germany and London and Italy. Everybody's looking for her, so they're all searching the websites, and people are collecting photos of other friends, and here, so that they're all trying to contribute and help. So it's just been phenomenal. I mean, the amount of support that we're getting, and it's just, like I say, it's great. It's really great.
Thank you. This woman who is looking for her sister, Margaret Eckerman. Thank you. And you are looking here also for a loved one?
This is my brother-in-law. His name is Karamo Trera. Karamo, Trera, Trera. And fortunately for my sister, he was in the second building on the 97th floor working for Fiduciary Trust. And fortunately, he called my sister right beforehand, and before the second airplane hit, and told her that, number one, they weren't evacuating anymore, and also that he loved her. So we're just happy that they got a chance to say goodbye to each other, and we're happy. I mean, that's the one important thing, and it's her 4-year wedding anniversary. Yesterday we spent the day on the web posting his picture everywhere, going to every single hospital. If anybody's seen him, please, because yesterday was their wedding anniversary, and we'd just like a resolution to this. And we really want justice done, because this is a horrible tragedy. And I mean, I'm donating a stapler in there, and it's like ridiculous. I'm donating a stapler, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people who are in so much pain right now, and it hurts me to see my sister in so much pain over Karamo Trera. It's very hard.
It's interesting. I've heard from many people with relatives in the second tower that they called after the first explosion and said, we're not leaving. It sounds like that's what happened.
There were 2 phone calls. The first phone call that he made to her was that they are evacuating, and we were all very happy because we were all kind of on the phone, my whole family and my sister. We were all like, oh my God, what happened? Because I work downtown. And then they said they were evacuating. We were all happy. Go, 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 said my sister, go. And then he called again and said, oh, you know what, everything's fine, don't worry. He was trying to calm her down. Stay calm, I love you so much. Don't worry about me, I'll be okay. And then they hung up, and then as soon as about 50 seconds later, the other airplane hit. We saw it on the news.
That must have been, so you were sitting with your sister as the second airplane hit.
Well, basically, I was downtown on Church and I saw the whole thing happen. So when I saw that second tower get struck, I ran back inside and I called her on the phone and I said, "Call him, call him, call him," and it was too late. So if anybody has any information about Karamotrera, please, it is so painful for us. Please call 212-865-3365. Please, if anybody saw him either in his last moments or if they know that he's alive, we're desperate. Everyone's desperate for information. Thank you so much.
I know that families today have been at the Armory, they've been at hospitals. Tell me, for the past 2 days, where have you been? What have you done?
We've been to every single hospital. We've been to Beekman, Cabrini, St. Vincent's, and like 10 other hospitals. We were going to go to New Jersey, but we couldn't. And we also just did the Armory.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck to you. We're now going to go back to you in Atlanta.
Thank you, Elizabeth Cohen in New York. Horrible stories, hundreds more in New York, and there are hundreds more here in Washington from the terrorism at the Pentagon, which is about 2 miles behind me. But we're going to turn back to the investigation. Osama bin Laden may end up the target of U.S. fury, but that doesn't mean he'll be an easy target. Let's go live now to CNN national security correspondent David Enzer here in Washington. David, what's the status of the investigation?
Well, the status of the investigation is still that the evidence is pointing heavily to Osama bin Laden's organization, but the Bush administration does not have the kind of evidence it's ready to say proves that that's who did this. They're not ready to make a final decision at this point. But already they and a lot of people outside are starting to think about what's the next step. How do you go after bin Laden and his organization if you do decide that he is guilty of these terrible attacks? It is not going to be easy. And a number of officials, senators like Senator McCain and others, have said that likely you would have to use ground troops, that bombs might not do it this time. They didn't do it in '98. They might not work this time either. So there are concerns about that. There's also a sense, though, that the U.S., after the losses it suffered, many people in the United States would support a decision, even if it costs some blood, to resolve this matter and end the danger of terrorism. But would it end the danger of terrorism? A number of experts argue that it would take more than troops, that it would involve an occupation of a long-term type that could be fraught with all sorts of problems. So nobody's ready to say where the administration's going yet. Outside experts say that the choices are not going to be easy ones. Greta?
All right, thank you, David Enzer. With Osama bin Laden believed to be in Afghanistan and a potential target, how are people there handling the situation? Our Nick Robertson is in Kabul, Afghanistan, and joins us by video phone. Nick?
Well, Greta, certainly the Taliban leadership growing increasingly concerned about what may happen next, issuing another statement only a few hours ago, again trying to distance Osama bin Laden from what happened on Tuesday in the United States. They said in this statement, how could Osama bin Laden have been involved in that? They said, how could he have trained pilots? Where could he have trained pilots? They said it was impossible to imagine that he had, therefore proving he wasn't involved. They said that they wanted everyone who was working on this, on the investigation, to think carefully about how they proceed next. And certainly on the streets in Kabul, growing apprehension also about what may come next. The streets a little quieter Thursday. It's Friday morning here now. Today, traditionally a day of rest, a day of prayer, but very quiet on the streets. Many people staying at home. Few people, however, we're aware of at this time leaving the city. After 20 years of civil war, many people here are very, very poor, and we talked to some of them yesterday. They told us, we're concerned about what's happening, we're worried about it, but we're too poor. Our main concerns are really just getting food for the coming evening. So apprehension here, but a lot of people really not knowing what to do next. A lot of common people really just sitting tight and waiting to see what happens, Greta.
All right, Nick, thanks for joining us from Afghanistan. We're going to go back to New York to Elizabeth Cohen, who's standing by with the governor of New York. Elizabeth?
Here we come. We're here on the corner of 26th and Lexington with Governor George Pataki. Just saw him hugging people who are looking for their family members, tears in his eyes. Tell me, what has it been like for you?
It's not what it's been like for me. It's for the people who are suffering. You know, all America grieves, but those who've lost a wife or a child, their pain is even greater than ours. So we have to stand with them. We have to stand with the brave firefighters, the Port Authority teams down right now. They lost their top management. They lost dozens of their police, but they're out there. We have to stand with them. They're the ones who are going to bring us through this.
What can you say to people? I saw you just talking, but I couldn't hear what you were saying. What can you say to people here?
They're not alone. The people of New York are with them. The people of America are with them. We continue to make the search and rescue effort the highest priority. We're doing everything we can, and thousands of people are helping right now, and millions are praying right now.
The people who I've been talking to, they say that the authorities have been incredibly organized, incredibly helpful, but they say they just have no clues. Do you have any idea when they would get some clues?
We just can't give time frames or timelines. That wouldn't be right. There's never been a darker day or a greater tragedy in American history, and that's why we're doing everything we can, trying to give the people as much information as quickly as possible. But obviously nothing like this has ever happened. But we will get through it. The people are strong. They're standing shoulder to shoulder, and we will get beyond this.
Tell me, I've mostly seen here what city services have done for people. Tell me what the state of New York is doing for people, for families here.
It's been a great cooperative effort. You know, the shelter behind us is something where it's a state armory where we mobilize the National Guard. But it's not a question of this agency or that agency, the city leadership, the state government. President Bush has delivered every single thing from Washington, from the federal government we've requested. And most importantly, you see out here thousands of volunteers, people without any official role, but just here to help, and they are helping.
Thank you, Governor George Pataki. Thank you. Now back to you, Wolf.
Thank you,
very
Elizabeth.
Much, Elizabeth, and thank the governor for us as well. Meanwhile, here in Washington, Congress is working with a singleness of purpose seldom seen, both to fund the recovery effort and to back a U.S. military's response. Joining us now, the House Minority Leader Richard Gephardt, as well as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert. Thanks to both of you for joining us. First of all, Mr. Speaker, what's the status of a resolution or some sort of declaration that you're working on?
Well, there's three things that we've done. First of all, yesterday we passed a resolution, a sense of the Congress, a joint resolution saying what the Congress's feeling on this is and vowing to work with the President. The second thing is tonight we will pass an appropriations bill to help FEMA, first of all, take care of victims and try to find the rest of the victims, a huge cost there, and also to get our airlines flying again and the transportation committees that we can make sure that our skies are safe so people can resume traveling and life as normal as in this country. And the third thing is to give the military, the President, the ability or resources to, first of all, investigate and find the people who perpetrated this terrorist act. And then tomorrow we will begin and probably go through Saturday and debate and pass legislation that gives the President the power to pursue those people who committed this act.
Congressman Gephardt, are there any serious differences between you and the Speaker, between the Democrats and the Republicans, on how much authority to grant the President in terms of his planning for a military response?
We're working on that, and I'm confident that we will find a resolution of the minor, frankly, differences that there are. We need to be together, and we are together as parties and as people, and with the President. This is a national challenge, and I think all of our people are united, as we were in World War II, to see this challenge down and to make sure we succeed in facing it.
Speaker Hastert, it's Greta Van Susteren. Speaker, how involved are you with the White House on this, or is the White House pretty much handling this themselves?
Well, we've been in constant contact with the White House, and it's been done on a bipartisan basis. Both Leader Gephardt and I have been to the White House. We've talked about these issues, and we're working with them. We have to have this type of cooperation to make sure that both the ability to give the President the power is something that we can all agree on, and also the amount of money that we need to clean up the problems, to take care of our victims in Virginia and New York, and incidentally families that go through that whole Northeast area, and then go forward and fund the investigation and the ability to bring these terrorists to justice.
Congressman Gephardt, let me switch gears a little bit. Lots of changes are going to happen in air travel. How do we balance that with sort of issues of civil rights and the great freedoms we've enjoyed in this country?
Well, Greta, we're in a new day, and unfortunately we're in a new world, and we're probably not going to go back to the world that we were in. We have to find a new balance in our country between freedom and security. And we have to do that without giving up the needed civil liberties that we all enjoy and want. This is going to be a hard time, and we have to work together as Americans to try to redefine those two issues and to return to as much freedom as we possibly can. This is a big challenge, but America's up to it. Every generation of Americans has met the challenges of their time, and our generation is going to do the same.
Congressman Gephardt, let me follow up with one more question. If the United States identifies that it's Osama bin Laden and his cell who is responsible for this terrorism, and of course he is one of the 10 most, he's on the 10 most wanted list in connection with the bombings of the embassies in Africa. If we go forward and handle that problem, can we then go back to where we were in terms of our freedoms?
I don't think so, Greta. I would hope that could be, but I don't think it is. I think we're facing a foe here that's much more complicated and long-lasting, much more committed, much more willpower than we would like to even believe and admit. So we got a long fight on our hands here. I think we can win it, and I think we can do it while preserving necessary freedoms and civil liberties in this country. But we've got to really work hard together in a united fashion to do that. I'm confident we will do that.
Speaker Hastert, there's been an executive order on the books since the Ford administration, since President Jerry Ford signed it, namely that bars the U.S. from engaging in political assassinations. Is it time to rethink that executive order?
Well, you know, one of the things that we see here, this is not necessarily political. These are terrorists. They've infiltrated this country. They've invaded the liberty and freedom that our people in this country have known and cherished for over 200 years. So these people are here to disrupt and the lifestyle of Americans, to put this country in terror. I think, first of all, there's a resolve by this American people, by this Congress, by the President. We're not going to let that happen. And just like any criminal that perpetrates a crime in this country, we're going to go after that person. We'll find out who it is, go after it, and bring that person to justice.
Well, the question I guess a lot of Americans are asking, Mr. Speaker, is if Osama bin Laden did plan these terrorist operations and the U.S. concludes that definitively, should he be brought to justice or should he be killed?
I think Osama bin Laden better say his prayers.
What about that, Congressman Gephardt?
Well, I think the American people expect us to find who did this, to bring them to justice. In doing that, it may be that there has to be violence committed by American troops. If it comes to that, that's what should be done. This will not stand. What happened in this country, this is the largest violence on our soil by a foreign force in the history of our country, and it will not stand.
Mr. Speaker, have we tied the hands of our intelligence community over the years that they were not able to gather the appropriate intelligence to perhaps see this coming so it could have been prevented?
Look, I don't want to go back over what's happened over the years.
But have they not gotten enough funding? Have there been rules that have been put in place? I know that there's a lot of reluctance to pay people who might be in a conspiracy to give us information, but those problems.
I think we need to put resources in human intelligence, and I think we need to reevaluate our whole intelligence regime. Porter Goss, who's our ranking member, and along with Nancy Pelosi, who is the ranking Democrat, we're having some serious discussions. We need to make sure that the resources are there so that we can gather the intelligence to protect the American people. And there's some questions where they're there in the past, but the past is past. We need to move forward and get this work done.
Mr. Speaker and Congressman Gephardt, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Wolf?
Thanks, Greta. And from Washington, let's go back to New York once again. CNN senior analyst Jeff Greenfield is there. Jeff, you just heard blunt talk from the Speaker of the House, a Republican, and the Minority Leader, a Democrat, basically saying to Osama bin Laden, I think in paraphrasing what the Speaker said, say your prayers. What does that say to you?
Well, it says to me that they are planning to take him out. But the other thing that you talked about, Wolf, that I thought was very interesting was the whole question of how much of our liberties are we going to be giving up. And the real question, I guess, is how many steps are we going to take that will ultimately be fruitless in our effort to get some security? Curbside check-in, would that have stayed the hijackers? Every one of us has been through metal detectors for the last God knows how many years in airports. It's that kind of reaction, that mix of we must do everything we can conceivably think of, that in some cases may not only restrict what we do, but have really no impact on the broader fight against this incredibly shadowy enemy.
Willing in the short run to give up our civil rights. I mean, everyone here is, in this country is willing to give up anything to get on a plane safely. As time goes on, the fact is that curbside checking wouldn't have stopped this. The question about whether you've packed your own bags wouldn't have stopped this, or whether anyone asked you to carry. None of this would. So in a big picture, what is going to happen? What are we willing to do?
Well, I think the most important question before us, and it is why what follows is in some ways as tough as what we have gone through the last 3 days, is how much are we going to think rationally about what we have to do to make ourselves more secure? And I know there have been 100 bomb threats. We saw the Capitol being evacuated on a call that perhaps a week ago would not have been taken nearly that seriously. And I think in this sense we have to be asking ourselves whether or not our understandable instinct to protect ourselves is going to make us far, not only less secure internally, but lead us into habits that make us a lot less like America. Everybody said America is going to change, and that is regrettably probably true. But somewhere along the line, we need to keep our sense of reason enough so that we don't give the terrorists yet another victory more than they have already had in what was behind me.
Jeff, as these horrible events sink in, take us down to Manhattan, and right now, has there been any change in the mood from yesterday to today as far as you can discern?
There is this slow return to some kind of normal. I mean, the numbness is kind of fading a little bit, but every time you go into a major thoroughfare, you can feel the anguish. And remember, Wolf and Greta, we have not yet begun to really uncover the worst, that is, all of those bodies. You saw these scenes of people showing up with pictures of their loved ones and saying, if you have any information, please call. And our hearts go out to those people, in part because we know that literally thousands of them are missing only in the formal sense. They are buried under rubble, and they will not be seen. And we are going to be learning day after day of people we know, we may have worked with, we may have been friends with, who were there. Just one last point. This has been a golden decade for the city of New York. We've all talked about its renaissance. Crime is down. Money flowed in from the markets. The city felt to be the center of the universe in some way, which is why the terrorists struck here. And to say that we are slowly getting a sense of normalcy is really misleading. In the long run, this has changed this city, I believe, to its roots, and you can just see it going out into the streets and watching people react in ways large and small.
Greta, let me ask you, because I know you've spent a lot of time looking at this investigation over these past few days. Is there one single aspect of what happened that jumps out in your mind that says to you there must be something totally crazy going on that has to be immediately corrected?
No, it's funny, Wolf, maybe I'm a little bit raw since I heard the explosion at the Pentagon, turned and saw it, and I was only a few blocks away, and I had particles actually raining on me. I'm quite raw from it, so that's the first thing that jumps out at my mind. But the important thing, I think, is that, the Americans devote the resources so that we can get this broad conspiracy. I'm not worried about those 18 hijackers. They're dead. But what is so terrible about this is that people who are willing to give up their life to cause crime, like these suicide pilots, are extraordinarily dangerous. And if nothing else, we have to get all the people who are involved and send them a message. If you just had a little bit of involvement, guess what? You're going to take the full impact of the United States. So I think, get out there and investigate. Anybody who had a slight involvement, you're in, and you're going to take full responsibility.
Hey, Wolf, just one last point. We really have to stop calling this act senseless. Evil, monstrous, fine. But the terrorists knew exactly what they were doing. And from their twisted perspective, this was a highly sensible act. It struck at the heart of the greatest city in the world's one superpower. It has made us, it has rained death on thousands of people. It has got us questioning ourselves and our security. And if the response is to be rational and effective, we have to stop throwing phrases around like senseless. This was a deliberate and successful, horribly successful, evil act.
Jeff Greenfield in New York, thank you so much once again. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Stay tuned, of course, to CNN's continuing coverage throughout the night, including a special report with Aaron Brown and Paula Zahn at 10 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 hour from now. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Good night, Greta.
Good night, Wolf. And up next, Larry King Live. Tonight, Larry is joined by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and others. I'm Greta Van Susteren. Larry's next.